Dana White has spoken up again about this big secret fight that fans will never ever see coming, and he talked about this a little bit at the end of last year, and I guess it kind of got brushed over, but now he's talking about it again, and now he's thinking about a fight like this coming in the fall. We're going to take a look at that clip, and as always, we're going to take a look at what people are saying about it to kind of get a gauge on how people are feeling about this. I'm going to give my thoughts, and I'd love to know what you think about it down below afterwards. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another video. If you are new here, my name is Kyle. I'm your guy with too many YouTube channels. Guys, let's check out MMA Orbit over here. This has the Dana White clip.
What I was talking about in December, yeah, I would imagine it's probably going to happen. And it's
a key word there being probably. You can stop that one right there.
going to happen in the fall. A fight that I'm working on.
Oh. Now, if it's a fight that he's working on and a fight that is probably going to happen, it makes me think that it involves Conor McGregor because you can never be sure. You can say, oh, you can't say, like, no matter what the talks are, McGregor will probably not show up, right?
Oh, and we'll never see it coming.
Nope.
This, though, how many times has Dana White said something like this? And it's really, guys, before we dive into it, it's very important to note I'm a fan of Dana White, but he has said this over and over and over again. When we talk about things like Dana White lying, and the reason that I mention I'm a Dana White fan is because I don't want this to come off as if I'm just hating on Dana White, because I know, like, a lot of people really do that. But when it comes to promoting these fights like these, take UFC 300, for example. The biggest fight ever, the biggest card ever. We're never going to see it coming, whatever he said about the card, right? It was Alex Pereira versus Jamal Hill, which could headline a regular pay-per-view. Don't get me wrong, it was a good fight, but it wasn't this huge, massive fight that, again, we'll never see coming like Dana White says over here. So what could it possibly be? Honestly, I'm thinking it's got to be something. If it's something that we'll never see coming, and it's actually something that we'll never see coming, and it doesn't end up being like Pereira going up to heavyweight, like that's a really, really big fight, but that's something that we know about. I would assume that it involves Conor McGregor. A lot of people have been talking about Khabib coming back, GSP coming back. I don't think that's the case. If you want to talk about Brock Lesnar coming back, like maybe, because I know that there's been talks with Brock Lesnar before, but even then, I would imagine that it involves Conor McGregor. If I had to take a shot in the dark here, and I am not confident in saying this whatsoever, but if we were all like putting money down on what it would be, I would say McGregor Diaz 3. That's what I would say. The probably makes sense because you never know what you're going to get with Diaz and McGregor. Nate Diaz has been open to returning to the UFC for a fight too. Conor McGregor said that he is, of course, still fighting, right? But I don't think that's ever going to be the case. But I think that's the fight that they are going to be working on. Let's take a look at what some of the comments had to say about this, though. Not just from MMA Orbit, but some replies that we found over on X as well, because this interview was everywhere. The top reply to MMA Orbit was from Combat Casuals. It's McGregor versus Diaz 3. Bookmark this. I believe that to be the case. Plus, you got to think about it, too. It's a fight that they would take against each other because Conor McGregor is looking for an easy fight. Nate Diaz is incapable of fighting anymore. Nate Diaz thinks that he can beat Conor McGregor. So at that point, who are they actually going to have picked for opponents for each other? Unless it's like, I just thought of this now, McGregor Masvidal. We know that Masvidal wants to come back to the UFC. Get you match just McGregor Cerrone rematch or something like that. But let's continue on. Fight Oracle had this to say: There's nothing possible that would qualify as never saw coming unless he found a time machine and Rickson and Fedor are fighting. To be honest with you, I agree with this reply over here, though. Francis versus Jones would be unseen. That's absolutely true. No, Ngannou only has one fight left on his PFL deal. Not far-fetched. I think that would be unseen. If anybody calls Ngannou versus Jones, that'd be crazy. And I don't believe that's it either, because Dana White is pissed off at Francis Ngannou, and I don't think that he would bring the money. I don't think he would bring the money like a Brock Lesnar would. It definitely relates to the return of McGregor. Completely agree with that. It's got to be a fight that we'll never see coming. Plus, we heard the talks about McGregor fighting Logan Paul, and we know that Dana White a long time ago was talking about having Logan Paul with his wrestling background in the UFC. That one wouldn't shock me either. Could you imagine? Paul versus CM Punk. That's what we got, okay? John Jones versus Randy Couture for the heavyweight title. Could you imagine? Could you imagine he comes back for that? Conor versus Logan in UFC. That's exactly what I was talking about. There is no chance that they would do the UFC. At least I don't think. Unless they want to do like some special rules boxing match, okay? I'm tired of this marketing crap. How can we keep the UFC exciting? Hint at fandom fights and then let us down. Yeah, unfortunately, this is what Dana White has been doing. Like, I love the UFC. I love their matchmaking, but I no longer get hyped for these like crazy fights that Dana White has planned. And poor Mario Batista can never escape these comments. Mario Batista versus Hamza Chimaev is in the works. Yeah. Oh, poor Mario Batista, man. Hear me out. Jones versus Lesnar. This one I could actually see happening. Jones wants a Lesnar fight. Doesn't want Tom Aspinall, I will note. Dana can justify giving Jones that huge of a payday because Brock would make more than Jones. Brock has just been sitting around because WWE hasn't been using him since the Vince stuff. Or McGregor versus Diaz 3. I actually really don't mind the idea of Jones versus Lesnar. Could you imagine, though? Could you imagine that they screw Tom Aspinall out of a heavyweight title fight again against John Jones? John Jones doesn't retire, and he actually fights Brock Lesnar. I could see that being the case. I really, really could, okay? Only fight people won't see coming is Khabib versus Islam. What? There's no way. There's no way they would do that. I do think Khabib versus GSP could be in play, in grappling potentially. Jones versus Brock is in play. I'd rather see multi-fight tourney for BMF. Poirier, Holloway, Gaethje, Volk, and insert more. They would never do that because they'd be burning guys. Yeah, I mean, it's a fun idea, but they would never in a million years do Khabib versus Islam. Or, I mean, like, those two fighters would never fight against each other. Khabib versus GSP, I do not believe either of them are coming back unless they actually do a grappling match. That I can see Khabib versus GSP, but that's not even, like, one of the fights. I would say that's not even a fight you could book, but Dana White has underperformed in the past, you know, with this type of stuff. Alex Smile had this to say. Yeah, he said the same about UFC 300 main event too, and we saw what we got. Yep. Yeah, we've seen stuff like this too many times from Dana White, unfortunately. And again, I really, really like Dana White. I'm a fan of Dana White, but I don't believe him when it comes to this type of stuff. I'll have to believe it when I actually see the fighters enter the octagon. Not the announcement. I don't care. Until the fighters are actually in the octagon, that's when I will get hyped for it. But you know how we talked about Mario Batista earlier and how I feel bad for him? Why don't you check out this video on screen where I talk about how Mario Batista does not deserve the hate that he has been getting. You can watch that video right here, guys. Thank you very much for being here. Take care.